What's up, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to episode 2 of Not Another True Crime Podcast. This is DannieBSpeaks, and I'm going to do a continuation, I guess a part 2 of the case against Tim Norman from the television show Welcome to Sweetie Pies, who of course is accused of plotting and succeeding in the murder of his 21-year-old nephew back in 2016. The first part of the podcast, I'm going to be reading the actual FBI criminal complaint that was filed in St. Louis, Missouri regarding this case. And then we will get into some updates regarding the case that have come out within the past week since I recorded part 1 of this podcast. So let's go ahead and get right on into it. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and read the formal FBI complaint that was filed for this case. And I originally said I was going to put a link to this complaint in the show notes and on my website. I completely forgot, I'm not going to lie. So by the time I remembered that I said I was going to do that, I was just like, you know what, I'll just go ahead and just read it. There hasn't been that much of an update going on. So, I mean, there's been some developments, of course, but it's not as active because where things stand right now. Well, I'll explain all that later on in the podcast, but let's go ahead and get into the criminal complaint. Now, this was from events that took place on March 14th, 2016. Of course, that was the day that Andre Montgomery was killed. This complaint was filed in the Eastern District of St. Louis, Missouri. It was presented on August 11th, 2020. The formal offense description is conspiracy to use interstate commerce facilities and commission of murder for hire resulting in death. I'm not going to read the whole complaint because a lot of it is just a whole bunch of bureau talk and all this other stuff, and I just really want to get down to the get down where everything is completely outlined. And I mean, there's way too much evidence, and this is what I was saying last podcast, that it's not looking good because there's way too much evidence going on. But let's just go ahead and jump down to the part where it starts describing the two of them. As outlined herein, there exists probable cause to believe that James Timothy Norman conspired with Terica Ellis, and of course, I don't know if her name's Terica or Tarika, I don't care, so we're going to call her Terica because that looks right, and or others known and unknown to investigators at this time to use a facility of interstate commerce, namely a cellular telephone, to commit a murder for hire in exchange for United States currency in violation of Title 18 United States Code Section 1958. In October 2014, James Timothy Norman attempted to obtain a $250,000 life insurance policy on his 18-year-old nephew, Andre Montgomery, for which Norman was the sole beneficiary through Americo Insurance Company. 2 weeks later, Norman attempted to obtain a second life insurance policy on Montgomery in the amount of $200,000, in addition to an accidental death rider in the amount of $250,000 through Forrester's Insurance. The Forrester's policy issued listing Norman as the sole beneficiary, and Norman paid the monthly premiums directly from his checking account. In March of 2015, Norman attempted to obtain a replacement policy on Montgomery in the amount of $249,999, but the application was denied. The application for all of these policies contained numerous false statements regarding Montgomery's income, occupation, and family history. On March 14, 2016, at approximately 8:02 p.m., Montgomery was killed by gunfire at 3964 Natural Bridge Avenue, which is located in the city of St. Louis within the Eastern District of Missouri. On March 10, 2016, Montgomery received an email message from Terica Ellis at gmail.com advising him that I'm on my way in town. A search of TericaEllis@gmail.com account indicated that this email address belongs to Terica Ellis, an exotic dancer residing in Memphis, Tennessee. On March 13, 2016, the day before the Montgomery's murder, Norman flew from Los Angeles, California, where he primarily resided, to St. Louis and arrived in St. Louis at 12:12 a.m. on the morning of March 16, 2016. On or about March 13, 2016, Ellis posted on her Instagram account with the username Alexis the Great, good Lord, that she was in St. Louis and would return to Memphis on March 14, 2016. Shortly after 1 p.m. on March 14, 2016, in the area of Chase Park Plaza, two temporary phone numbers subsequently identified as belonging to Ellis and Norman became active in the same geographic location as numbers identified as belonging to Norman. The first temporary phone activated near the Chase Park Plaza had number blah blah blah, the second phone number blah blah blah. Both Ellis Phone 1 and Norman Phone 1 were activated the day of Montgomery's homicide and deactivated the day after the homicide. These are what they were talking about, the burner phones. These phones communicated consistently throughout the day of the homicide, and both were deactivated and ceased activity on March 15, 2016, the day after the homicide. Montgomery's cellular telephone was located in close proximity to his body and was forensically examined following the murder. Witnesses at the scene of the homicide indicated that Montgomery went outside to meet someone after receiving a telephone call and was shot and killed shortly thereafter. The forensic examination of Montgomery's phone and subsequent investigation revealed that the two people he spoke to within the 10 minutes prior to his death were his friend KT and Terica Ellis, using Ellis' cell phone number 1. As further described herein, the location information associated with Ellis' phone number 1 put the phone in the vicinity of the murder at the time the murder occurred. A review of toll records and text communications to Montgomery's phone revealed that Montgomery texted Ellis' phone 1 the address of the house where he was ultimately murdered at 7:07 p.m. on March 14, 2016. At 7:07 p.m., less than an hour before Montgomery's homicide, Ellis also placed a phone call to Norman, phone number 3. Investigators believed that this was for the purpose of sharing Montgomery's location with Norman. Using Ellis' phone number 1, Ellis was communicating with Norman on Norman phone 1, that's both of their burner phones, in the time surrounding Montgomery's murder. Despite being at the scene of Montgomery's murder at 8:02, Ellis's first phone call was not to the police but rather to Norman at 8:03 p.m., at which time her phone location data showed that she was driving in the direction consistent with her returning to her home in Memphis, Tennessee. Between March 15th and March 17th, Ellis deposited over $9,000 in cash to multiple bank accounts, including a savings account she opened the day after the homicide. Prior to the homicide, Ellis's checking account had a negative balance. On March 21, 2016, after Montgomery's murder, a man identifying himself as Norman and using a phone number known to belong to Norman called Foresters in an attempt to collect on the life insurance policy Norman had obtained on Montgomery in October of 2014. Despite several additional efforts to collect on the policy since Montgomery's murder, Foresters has yet to pay out on the policy due to Norman's failure to provide several requested documents. On March 22, 2016, Ellis flew from Memphis, Tennessee to Los Angeles, California with her mother and Ellis's daughter. Location data obtained from SD's cellular telephone, that's who they're saying is her mother's initials, so that's her mother. From SD's cellular telephone shows that on at least one occasion, she was in the same location as Norman, phone number 2, and Norman, phone number 3. So I guess he has two cell phones, which, that's no big deal. Ellis and her family returned to Memphis, Tennessee on March 26, 2016. On April 30th, 2016, Norman sent Ellis $700 in U.S. currency via Western Union. Based on the foregoing, your affidavit serves that there is probable cause to believe that James Timothy Norman used a cellular telephone, a facility of interstate commerce, traveled interstate, and conspired with Terica Ellis and others to effect the murder of Andre Montgomery in exchange for sums of U.S. currency in violation of Title 18 United States Code Section 1958. So there's that. I mean, there it is, spelled out. Affidavit had about, what was that, like 15, 16 different things that I read on there, different activities, events that they've been monitoring. It's not looking good, but now both of these idiots will just have to face the consequences. So I have a few highlights of updates that I want to get into. Nothing really in depth yet, but there's just a few things that have happened that feel to keep everybody updated if you haven't really been following it, or you may have lost count of what's going on, or you're getting conflicting information. This information that I have is actually from people who know what's going on. Now, the first thing I want to discuss is the third person who has been arrested so far that we know. And this was the person I was talking about who was the insurance agent in this. And he was also a former music producer in the St. Louis area. And his name is, let me pull it up because I don't know how to pronounce it correctly, but it looks like it may be YL Yagnam. And they call him Wally. That's his nickname. And he's 42 of St. Louis, Missouri. And he is being charged with one count of conspiracy to commit wire and mail fraud. And that is according to court documents. He has not been charged in the alleged murder for hire plot, but he was charged with the financial transaction that had gone on. He's actually been released on bail, so he's out of jail right now. I haven't got any updates on his trial date or anything like that. He's not charged in the murder, but he is charged with the financial transaction, which still is not good. They're saying that he forged documents to be able and make it look like Andre had this amount of money, he was worth this amount of money or whatever, and this is why it was fraudulently done, and this is why Tim wasn't able to produce the correct documentation that the insurance company needed. It wasn't just the death certificate, which was something that he would definitely need, the official death certificate, but it was also a lot of Andre's information that he put in the insurance policies, but he wasn't able to provide that the information was true. And someone asked me, they said, do you think that when he went to go cash in the insurance policy that this is when the investigation started with Tim? And I said, most likely, yeah, definitely. I mean, that's red flag already to have an insurance policy taken out on someone when you're not his next of kin. I guess you can kind of overlook that. I know some people said that if their parents aren't in a good position or whatever, they may have taken out life insurance policies on nieces, nephews, cousins, or whatever, just to make sure that things get taken care of. But we know that wasn't why Tim was doing it. Not even then, but now especially. In not so shocking news, which a lot of people already thought may have been going down, but the children are out here saying that Tim has a multi-million-dollar insurance policy, life insurance policy, for Miss Robbie. And she didn't know anything about it. So we're wondering, like, was she next? I mean, I hate to say it, but I mean, he's a crazy fool. So who wouldn't think that he would try to take out his mother too? And remember last episode, I also mentioned that someone broke into her house. I don't know how many times it was, but I know it was enough for her to be shook enough to move. And remember I said something like, what if she was there when that happened? It could have turned completely left and something could have happened to Miss Robbie then. So obviously he didn't care. And if you're going to do this to your nephew, regardless of the relationship that you had, I don't see this isn't true that he did have the multi-million-dollar life insurance policy for his mother. Who knew? Who knows? And some people saying she may not even be safe today. So I don't know, but most likely, I doubt now. I mean, I'm sure, Miss Robbie's a businesswoman, so I'm pretty sure she is taking care of a lot of ins and outs to get Tim removed from a lot of things. But I wonder if she had him listed as her beneficiary or next of kin or anything like that. I don't know, but I mean, wow. Everyone was trying to figure out, like, how did Tim meet Terica? How did they come in contact with each other? Like, were they messing around? Because there's really no ties with him in Memphis that has been said. I don't think there were any sweetie pies in Memphis. Not saying that that's not somewhere that he has gone before or gone frequently or whatever, but they met on Facebook. That's how they met. They didn't know each other from Adam. They met on Facebook, and this is what they did. This is what they came up with, and now look at y'all. I mean, okay, so when Andre moved back to Houston after he graduated high school, Tim kept trying to get Andre to come back to St. Louis. Andre thought it was weird. He was just like, this dude doesn't even really like me, and he doesn't really want to deal with me. And not only that, Tim wasn't really even living in St. Louis at the time, so why is he trying to get me to come back? Like, I'm trying to get my life together here and do things here and whatever he was doing, and Tim just kept trying to get Andre to come back. There was no reason or whatever, and this was making Andre a little suspicious, to leading up to him saying that if anything ever happened to me, Tim did it. So he knew something was going on. He knew something wasn't right. That has to be a terrible feeling. Oh, my goodness. So he knew something was going on. There have been rumors for years saying that Tim was no longer employed by his mother. He wasn't, after the lawsuit, they cut ties for good or whatever, business-wise. Then a lot of people were like, well, I don't think that happened because he was able to open the Sweetie Pies in Jackson, Mississippi, where he was living and where he was arrested. I feel that when Tim was released from jail, he was given an opportunity to work at a successful business. And not only at a successful business, but a family business that he could have benefited from if he would have just done things for good. You know what I mean? If he wouldn't have been out here just acting a fool and trying to do too much and plotting murders and all this other stuff. It could have really just turned out a different way completely. Miss Robbie, I think because her thing was at Sweetie Pies, they hired ex-cons. That was one of their things. She believed in giving people second chances. There were people there who had records and all this other stuff, had been to jail and had been homeless, just everything. And she gave them a second chance. And a lot of them were so not only thankful, but looked at Miss Robbie and the family just as their own family as well. They were really super close. So, of course, her son wouldn't be any exception. He's getting out of jail. He needs a job. I have this business, let's do this. I need a partner who I feel I can trust. Okay. She ended up making him general manager of Sweetie Pies. Not only just general manager, but he was running, I can't remember, was it the Florissant address or whatever? It was the one that they mainly showed on Sweetie Pies, especially the first couple seasons. It wasn't the original one. It was the second location. He was running that one. That was basically his restaurant right there. Little people didn't know in 2014, and this was even before he moved out to LA, but in 2014, Miss Robbie fired him as general manager because she said he was doing way too much. He was stealing money, just doing all these crazy things that were bringing down her business. And it was turning off business partners and people who she had developed these relationships with. it was just too much. So she had to let him go. She fired him as general manager, but of course she hired him back. Then there was another lawsuit prior to the one that made it public back in 2016. But there was a lawsuit before then when he first moved to Los Angeles and he was opening these restaurants under her name, well, under the Sweetie Pie's name. He had to end up changing the name, and the restaurants that he was opening, he had to name them like Sweet Times and something, some other stuff, because he was forbidden to use the Sweetie Pie's name. Of course, she hired him back, and I don't know if he was still general manager. She gave him enough power back to be able to open and run the Jackson, Mississippi restaurant. Miss Robbie is great financially. Like, she's a multimillionaire. Tim was struggling financially because he was out here doing too much. I don't know what he was into. I don't know if that's ever going to come out and why his money was so bad, but he had been stealing money from his mother, and then this insurance plot. I mean, he was really out here struggling, and you wouldn't have known it. And he was struggling so bad that he had to fill out I guess it's like an affidavit or something like that, to show that he can't afford a personal attorney. Like, he had to turn in all I don't think he had to turn in anything, but he had to let it be known what his finances were, and so that they can be checked, like how much money he has in the bank, what type of savings he has, and all these other things, because he has no money for a personal lawyer. So for him to be able to get a public defender, he had to fill out this form or whatever. So obviously for him to get a public defender, Miss Robbie ain't messing with him. She ain't trying to help him, which is something a lot of people were hoping that she wouldn't do. Just let him be in there and suffer. So, I wouldn't be me if I didn't throw a little shade in there. And this is going to be shade courtesy of Tammy Roman, who, of course, is from the Real World 2 fame. And, she was on Basketball Wives most recently. And she and Jennifer Williams, who, of course, is Tim's ex, didn't see it for each other. So Tammy being Tammy had to be messy. And I was kind of here for it because I wanted Jennifer to know that you don't need to say anything else. You said your part. Leave it alone. I hope she will. But Tammy being Tammy. So according to Madame Noir, on Tammy's Bonnet Chronicles, she said, "Jennifer, you escaped it, girl. If he would do this to his nephew, bitch, you didn't have a chance, and he probably wouldn't have got caught because no one gives a fuck." Excuse my language, but that's what she said. Tammy's going to give it to you raw and unfiltered. So, I mean, even Page 6 called it classless and tacky, which it is to a sense, because, you can't say that really, but it's Tammy, so, there's that. So Jennifer responded back, and she said, "I don't talk to Tammy, and I don't know why she is making fun of a horrific situation where a life was lost. Tammy is classless, and it was done in poor taste while the family is trying to come to terms with the ultimate betrayal of one of their own. This is very true." She goes on to say, "That's all I have to say about Tammy's tacky ass. With everything going on in the world and the climate within the black community, I'm saddened a black woman is tearing another one down." But Jennifer, girl, would you expect anything differently, especially from someone like Tammy? Okay. But I just thought that was just ridiculous, but I felt like sharing it because, you got to throw a little shade in there somewhere. So let's talk about Tim's past criminal history a little bit, shall we? So at 16, and I'm sure it was going on before then, but around 16 years old, Tim started doing a string of armed robberies. So he was going in there with AK-47s, and, and Tim's a big guy. He's 6'5". I don't know if he had hips of steel back then or whatever. He's a big guy. So he's going in these places, and he would just, if it was a weekday, if it was a school day, he would go before school, during school or whatever, commit these armed robberies, and then just return to school and sit in class like nothing happened. Sociopath right there. Just like, what? And lastly, the most recent update that I heard, which was just a couple days ago, is that Tim is still being held in a Madison County jail, which is in Mississippi, without any bond. He's been assigned a public defender. Remember, I said he had to submit the paperwork saying that he couldn't, because it's a high-profile case or whatever, that he couldn't afford a private attorney. So he's been assigned a public defender, but the public defender, he won't get to them until St. Louis. The one that until he gets extradited back to St. Louis, I should say. Terica is currently being held at the DeSoto County Jail in Tennessee and has also been assigned a public defender in St. Louis. The extradition of both Tim and Terica is on hold due to COVID-19. They both have court dates next week, so I don't know if those are their arraignments. That's what I'm thinking they would be, because I don't think they've been arraigned yet. Just trash. They're both just trash. I need to know if they found out who pulled the trigger. I guess there were 2 other people in the house with Andre when he got killed, and there's a little discrepancy on where he was shot or whatever, but there were 2 other people in the house who got killed. When Andre got killed, and they were both shot as well. I guess they survived. I hadn't heard anything else. I know that at the time they were both in critical condition, but from what I'm understanding, I haven't heard anything else. They both survived their injuries. So I wonder what they know and if they've been cooperating or whatever. But I need to know who pulled this trigger. Who shot this young man? Who shot and killed this young man, I should say. Who did they have do this? Was it just some random? Was it someone Tim knew? Was it someone Terica knew from back home? I mean, because, girlfriend, she got on out of the state after the deed was done, so I don't know. I need to know who pulled the trigger and who knows what. The discrepancy about where he was actually shot is up in the air right now, because the original report said that he was shot in the house. And then recently they've been saying that he was in the house when he died. Other reports are saying, and even Miss Robbie said it, and whoever else was involved, who was there, said that he received a phone call to meet someone outside. So I don't know if that's where the outside is coming from, or I don't know if he opened the door when he was supposed to be meeting Terica and whoever pulled the trigger shot him right there, or if it was actually outside. I don't think it really matters, because the life was lost regardless where it was, but a lot of people are making a big deal about that. I'm not understanding why, but I don't know, maybe people like those kind of details or whatever, or maybe it means something else. Like, was there someone else involved that was in the house? I don't know. We'll just have to see. Time will tell. And of course, as I hear any more updates, I will, of course, let you all know. It'll be on another podcast. But next week, I'm going to have a different topic, a different case that I want to discuss. Of course, unless something big this happens, then we might get a part 3 next week, but we'll see. I don't want to spend too much time on this, when I'm just getting a little bit of information, but it's something that I'm really interested in because I actually watched this show the whole time it was on. So we'll just have to play it by ear. Whatever we find out, I will let you know. So again, thank you for tuning in to DannieBSpeaks Presents Not Another True Crime Podcast. I hope you all enjoyed the little update that I provided to you. You can check out this and all other podcasts that I have done, including DannieBSpeaks, the podcast, on my website at DannieBSpeaks.com. You can also listen to them. They're all now on Apple Podcasts, Google Play Music, which I think now is Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and I'm trying to get with Amazon/Audible. I'm in the process of filling out the information to try to get on there. So we'll see. If you have any comments, questions about anything regarding the website, the podcast, whatever, you can always hit me up at DannieBSpeaks@gmail.com. If you would like to be a sponsor of the show, or if you would like me to sponsor you, please hit me up as well at DannieBSpeaks@gmail.com. And again, thank you so much for tuning in. This has been episode 2 of Not Another True Crime Podcast. So I will check you all out on the next one. Have a good one. Be safe and talk to y'all later. Peace.